and we have Mr. Dunbar. Anybody else on the phone? Okay. We could go around the room and do introductions. Do you want to start, Ms. Price?
My name is Sarah Price, youth rep.
Kevin Cross. Pete Peterson.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Austin Davidson, and then members of the administration.
Courtney Peterson, Office of Management and Budget.
Alden Thurn, Finance Office.
Paul Rossway, Treasury.
We have quite a few people in the back. I don't think we all have to do introductions, but just know for the record that we have some assembly staff and a lawyer from the municipal attorney's office, auditor, a couple other folks in the back, and Mr. Frisk, CFO, who's hiding in the back. And Anna Brawley, who's the chair of the Budget Advisory Commission. And we will go ahead and start with the report from Ms. Brawley. And I'd just like to thank members who are here. I had a strong desire to play hooky today, but harder to do when you're chairing a meeting. So thank you for being here, and everyone else.
Hi, for the record, my name is Anna Brawley, the chair of the Budget Advisory Commission. And just for the report, so we meet monthly. We used to meet on the first Thursday of the month. We moved that to the second Thursday. So we would have had our last meeting a week ago today on the 12th, but we did not achieve quorum, and so we ended up not traveling in. And then just as a general report, you know, as we know, the OMB Director Frasca left a couple Fridays ago. I know we have our capable staff here, but it will put a hamper on our ability, I think, to move forward with our department reviews and some of the work that we were planning to do over the summer. So we're hopeful that the administration fills that position soon. And then also just to report, there are 11 of us, or 11 seats, but as of July 1st, there will be 4 vacancies. So Mr. Salt was a member and has left. Another member has stepped down due to a scheduling conflict, and then 2 of our longtime serving members are not renewing for another term. And so that's going to be challenging for our quorum. We do need to have at least 6 members present for a quorum, because it's the number of seats, not the number of people present. So anyway, so unfortunately just reporting some logistical challenges, and it'll make it a little bit hard for us to operate until those seats are filled and staff is rehired. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Appreciate that update. Courtney, would you mind just filling us in on what's going on in OMB? Or you're just acting, and is administration looking for another director, or what's that process going to look like?
I'm acting at this time because Marilyn's out. She will return on Monday, and then she'll be acting until the seat is filled permanently.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Any questions for Anna or comments? Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Brawley, to you and the other commissioners. Just had a question. Your meetings with directors, which that's something I believe you typically do before the budget cycle starts. And so will each commissioner or member of the commission then be meeting with 1 or 2 budget directors? And do you expect that you may have a resolution regarding the budget or suggested priorities prior to the budget process? Or if you could talk just a little bit about how you think that might play out. And I recognize too that you'll be short of folks that are now and will be soon. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the question through the chair. So we, excuse me, it's something we've done in years past where members take on, 2 to 3 departments, usually a small one and a large one, and excuse me, have those meetings. We do have those assigned. Obviously, the folks who aren't going to be serving won't be doing that, but we do hope to continue with those meetings over the summer. We've also talked about doing strategic planning in the fall, but at this point we haven't mapped out a process where we would end up with a specific resolution or a vote that we would take at this time. But we're certainly open to suggestions from the administration and the assembly if there's things we should focus on, or if there's other policy discussions we should have. I know the BAC has done that in the past. So TBD.
Thanks so much. And I know I always appreciate the resolutions and policy suggestions that your group makes. So thanks for all your work. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you again, Ms. Brawley. If you'll extend thanks to other members as well. And I think I heard Mr. Gates on the line for the record. We'll go next to item 3B, which is the MOA financial status report. I have Mr. Frisk listed, but I'm guessing that you're going to do it. Okay, thank you.
Through the chair, unfortunately, there's nothing to really report at this point. We don't usually start pulling financials until June.
That might come up.
Certainly, I apologize.
Just because
Yes, we don't start pulling numbers till June, so there's nothing to report at this time.
Okay, are there any questions from members? Sounds like that information will be forthcoming. Okay, you're helping us have a fast meeting here. I like it. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to 3C, which is an update on Fema reimbursement, and I'm guessing Alden, Mr. Kern's going to cover this.
Yes, ma'am, and I can always fill in the time however much time it should be. I'm going to go over my normal page today. It seemed to go over real well last month when we went project by project, and I already have a few new assembly members, so it might just be a good opportunity to kind of go through them again and kind of give an update. So hopefully you have the new page in front of you, which does show we're getting close to $100 million. It's been documented, and we'll talk about that as I go through the presentation, but that's $5 million more than what we had at this point last month. The first project, which is our one that's been out there for a couple of years right now, we currently have one request for information from FEMA in our hands. We've been reviewing that and trying to create a response to be able to get back. We've had well over 50 requests for information on that particular project from them. So it's not any farther than what it was last month, and we're still in the process of trying to do that particular review and response. The second project is actually getting a little bit of movement. Just before I came here, we received a request for information with 6 questions in that particular one, which has they're questioning approximately 10 of the transactions that are contained within that project. So we will, over the next week here, try look into each one of those individual questions and do a response back to them. A request for information could be they need more information, they're questioning its eligibility. There could be a variety of reasons why they might have a specific question. I just quickly scanned that before I came up here, but we did just get that one. But that is good, because at least it shows that FEMA is currently looking at that particular project, and we're hopeful that we're getting a little bit of movement on that one. The third project, which is the $7.2 million, that has one request for information that is in the municipal's court in our legal department and has been there for a period of time under review and consideration by them. So at such time as the legal department finishes their review, I'm sure we will get that response back to FEMA, but it has been holding for some period of time. The fourth project down, which is for $3.8 million, that one actually is moving pretty well. I had a long meeting with FEMA this morning. I had to agree to remove $430,000 out of that project and switch it to a different project, which is actually the project right below that. Once I have done that, which I gave them the concurrence to do, they are now able to move that particular project towards obligations. So that's probably our farthest moving project that has any kind of sheltering whatsoever in it. So once any project over $1 million requires Senate approval, so all these over $1 million projects, once even FEMA obligates them or says they're obligated, they still have to go to the U.S. government to get approved at that point. But I am more hopeful on this one that there are no more questions, and we're going to be able to hopefully get that project obligated maybe by the time the next meeting we have on this one. The $430,000, as I mentioned, that's being pulled out of that project will be put into the fifth project, which is that $8.8 million. I'm just moving that project up. Last month, that would have been in the projects that we were working on. The dollar amount has gotten to such a significant amount, I think it's time to put that into FEMA's court. So it'll actually be over $9 million now that I have to add that particular money. But that project, we were very close to submitting it, so that's why I moved it up on top rather than being on the work on the bottom. Same thing with the next project for 11.7 million. That project has gotten so large that we just want to get it going as well. It's very similar work. It just happens to be the last 6 months of the year versus the first 6 months of the year. The PW1, which is the state project for 269, that project did get obligated by the state. We're currently routing the obligating award document through the administration, and then they will, once that is signed, we will give that to them, and then we will request those funds by the state. They still have to review all the eligibility for expenditures and everything, but we at least have that project obligated compared to where it was last month, and the paperwork is moving along, so I am not anticipating any current problems with that project. PW32 community testing, that's one where we requested an amendment because we needed 14,000 more to finish our last couple of invoices. That project is almost obligated. We had to make a couple of changes in it recently, and it kind of had to go back and forth, but I fully anticipate that project will be obligated, and then once we get the OED signed off, we will submit the last reimbursement for the 270,000 that we still owe. But that one has moved since last month. The vaccination project did get obligated. We have signed the obligated award document, and we're in the process of preparing and finalizing the request for funds by the state. So we're in pretty good shape on that one. It's just going through the process to actually get the money. Management costs has been obligated for some time. We will probably ask for that difference between what we've documented and what we've been reimbursed here soon, just to get that 170,000 into the municipality. And there shouldn't be any problems with that particular number. We did, on the fire department testing, we did get the obligated award document, have it signed, have our request for funds to the state, so they're currently reviewing that. And then it goes through their multiple layer approval process, and then we should be able to get the money for that particular one. And then the last project there is a completed project. In the not yet submitted project. Sure.
Would you mind if I ask a question?
Yeah.
And I'll note for the record that about 5 minutes ago, Mr. Solt joined us, and he's on the phone as well. So just to sort of make it basic for folks who aren't used to these updates, I understand correctly, right, that the documented means documented by the meeting and put together, and then when you submit it to FEMA and they say, okay, this looks okay, then it's obligated. They're obligated to pay us back, and then the reimbursed column is actually what we've received today, right?
Those are correct.
Okay, and then so for project 100, LA management costs, how can it be that we've only documented under 700,000, but we've received, or we've been obligated 1.6?
So management cost works at 5% of what the obligated amounts are. At the time that we put management costs forward, we had approximately 40 million-ish obligated, 30-some million, whatever it was. So it was 5% at that particular point. So they obligated an entire amount, and then we can draw on that all the way up to that particular amount. As more of these projects get obligated, that we are capable of going back to FEMA and having that $1,595,000 number increase. For example, we're almost 100 million in documented. If all that were ultimately be obligated, that would mean 5 million would be eligible for this particular project, and they would just go and increase that amount at that point. So it's a flexible number. It's the only project like that is determined, but that number was created at a certain time when we had a certain amount that was already obligated, and they hold to that.
That makes sense. And so that's like an admin fee, essentially. Like if you were to get a grant, you would have an administrative fee that's okay.
Correct. They allow 5% for not people that are working on the projects, but
Right.
people who are working on the reimbursement
Yeah.
of the projects. Correct.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Okay, sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
So the really good news is that we've documented 87 million that I have in FEMA or soon to be in FEMA's hands. So that's a pretty good number. I will probably release the top 2 projects that are in the mass care sheltering within the next month, just to get those as well into their court and get them moving. They are tied, however, to that 3rd project that's in our legal. So no matter what happens when I release those, it'll all be dependent upon what happens with the $7.2 million third project down from the top. So they go hand in hand. If we submit them, they're not going to go anywhere because it's the same issue that top project has. But I do try to put as much pressure on the FEMA in putting projects into their court so that they have more to review and respond. And the faster we get them in there, the faster they can give our request for information back, and we can start moving these. Now, fast is nominal because, as you know, that top project's been there 2 years now. One other item that I'll probably come out here with, which kind of explains a couple of the bottom. Federal guidance just came down from the federal government that effective July 2nd, they are going from a 100% zero Fed versus state matching to a 90-10. So they have asked us to put end dates on all of our 2022 projects. Now, if you notice, they say through 7/1/2022 before they set up to 6/30, because they want all of our projects that are 100% to be in one area, and then in the 90-10s, if we have any work that begins July 2nd forward, in separate projects to make their life easier. Which we did. It may require us to split some invoices as well, but we've been doing quite a bit of that. But that was a new guidance that came down. The other real big guidance that came along with that, and there's a public comment right now, is they stated that streamlined projects in this 100% reimbursement threshold, which is from the beginning of the emergency through July 1st, we must have projects, at the minimum, projects created in the system before 12/31 of this year. Or you can't put a project in without going through a bunch of hoops after that. So as a result of that, I don't want to get caught off guard. So I've started putting a variety of projects in the system just so we have placeholders. So those last 4 on the bottom, you'll see there are no expenditures there, but that's an effort for me to get projects created. It does help you know what also might be outstanding and you know kind of what the buckets are. The FA stands for forced account, if anybody has that question. That's municipal labor. And FEMA doesn't want us to do one project, they want us to do it by time periods, so that's why you see the identical thing with different dates.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a couple questions, if that's okay. Anybody else? You're more in the queue too?
Sure.
Okay. Go ahead and I'll write mine down so I don't forget.
Oh, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Of these projects, either the ones that have been submitted and not yet approved or not yet submitted, are there any that appear that you'll get pushed back on reimbursement?
Through the chair, Mr. Cross. I wouldn't say entire projects will have pushback, but there are expenditures within certain projects that there have been pushback. Just as I mentioned, they pushed back this morning on one, and that was more of a moving than an ineligible kind of a thing. But there have been expenditures within these projects that they have questioned or challenged, whatever word you'd like to use on that. And a current decision that we've decided is we pull those out because we don't want to hold up the rest of the project as much as possible. And we're going to try to put those expenditures in, I don't know how many additional projects, it depends upon how we break them up at the very end, where we will go back and put those questionable charges and actually get a written determination by FEMA with regards to the eligibility of those particular expenditures that are out there.
What would you guess that percentage is of the total ask? What would you say those items being thrown back in your lap?
Quantity of transactions or a dollar amount?
I just meant as a total dollar amount. I'm looking at what the possibility is after all these requests are made, when the dust settles. How much will we still be obligated for, or roughly what do we anticipate that number would be from our request to what we actually, the taxpayer has to burden?
Through the chair, Travis, our CFO. The question, Mr. Cross, we can specifically cite for you right now one of the issues that we just had. We had a reimbursement in the pipeline that was determined to have $3,400 worth of ineligible expenses in it. So we pulled $3,400 off the table at that particular time in order to move a $3.4 million reimbursement request forward. So it happens. It's not frequent at this point. We still have a lot of obvious projects that are being determined on eligibility at this time. But since my time here, almost 11 months, we've actually pulled probably close to, I'd say, $1 million off the table in reimbursements that we've had processing through in order to move the larger project through to get money, and that's where that $41 million of reimbursements over time has come from, is that we pulled some money back from expenses that they've determined as ineligible and such. At this point in time, I'd say close to $1 million has been set aside in a catch-all project that we'll go back and try to get reimbursed for, but we didn't want to slow up the process for, like in this last one, $3,400 is a quick decision, easy to make. Pull it off the table and we'll go with the $3.4 million and move forward.
Thank you. And I guess part of my thought is that, you know, when we have these, whenever we have lots of debt, even though we may experience profit in other areas like alcohol tax, when you have more debt than you have profit, you not technically didn't make anything. So I guess part of my thought is there a way that we take a percentage of these areas where we made more money in taxes in different areas and create a reserve fund to cover anything where we don't get reimbursements? Because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but any shortfalls that we have would go back on the property taxpayer, and we'd have to adjust for it that way. Is that correct? I mean, I'm just looking to protect, we keep property taxes down so that we don't have to take any unreimbursed debt, put it back on them if there's a way we can take. Does that make sense? From other areas where
it
we
makes
have more
perfect
money than we
sense.
thought.
That would be a policy decision at the time from the administration on how, if there were unreimbursable expenses, how we would recoup the money that's already been expended at that time. I can't give you that it would be taxes or such. That's not my position as a policy decision at the administrative level of how we would look at reimbursement.
Yeah, that's why I'm just trying to figure out an aggregate, like what is that percentage might be kicked back in our lap, and can we plan accordingly in advance? But thank you.
So I had put myself in the queue, so I'll go ahead and go next. Just piggybacking on that, we do have a reserve fund, and that is what we're using to pay this. And so there is money. I mean, we have a trust, we have money, we have our 10 and 2 that Travis could describe. So we're not in debt, just to be clear about the terms. We're not in debt. We are owed this money, but the municipality overall has way more money in savings in sort of a simplified way than what's here. So like Travis said, then it's a policy call. If you don't get reimbursed for a certain percentage, what do you do? But we're not going into debt. We are using money we have. The municipality has made very smart decisions over time, and we have quite a bit of money saved up, which is good. Not all municipalities are in that position. So, and Travis, feel free to correct me or if you want to add anything to that. Okay.
I'm good.
Okay. A couple comments. So, one is that if the feds are moving to 90%, Mr. Thurn, is then the state picking up that 10%? Because traditionally, they've gone down to 75, and the state will pick up the 25. Have we heard from them yet? And in addition to that, are there any dates laid out that they'll go to 75 or to less than 90?
So this particular emergency is special. Most of the time it's 75-25 is what and we're fortunate to have a state that has the 25, because there are states that don't have any. So that's what the normal guideline is 75-25. The federal government on this particular emergency only said 100%, and that's what they're coming off of right now and doing the 90-10. The state is understanding that they have to pick up the 10% for expenditures that incur beginning July 2nd of this year going forward. For eligible expenditures that are being used to deal with COVID type related expenditures. So I haven't heard anybody with a problem with that. Dovetail a little bit, it's kind of similar to your question. The state was actually able to go and get FEMA on earthquake, which is a big number for not only us but also Matsu and Kenai, to go from 75-25 to 90-10, and it's going to save them approximately $20-some million because their percentage they have to pay is less. So they're actually making money on earthquake now compared to what they thought they were going to be spending. So I would hope that this 10% going forward on COVID shouldn't be a financial burden to the state on that, given the fact that they've got this nice windfall for them.
And so how does that process work with the state? You all are talking with them about what they'll do come July 2nd?
Yeah, it doesn't affect the we get the money. How the percentage is divvied up between the FEMA and the state is really not relevant to us. We get ultimately the entire amount, and then they have to determine in their accounting whether it was anything they had to kick in and what that affected their budgets, or whether it all comes from FEMA. And I think they do like a quarterly true up across all emergencies that are happening across the state and so forth.
And are they obligated by statute, or why are we so sure that the state will pay that 10%?
That's a question. I'm pretty sure there's probably a state statute
Okay.
that speaks to that, because it is normal policy, but I can't certainly speak to what that number is or anything like that. Just my experience has been, we are a 75-25 state, and we have historically never not paid the 25% to any emergency in the state of us. I think it's always dependent upon the state government allocating the funds to put in that particular account to make that happen, and I guess they could always not fund it, but I've never heard that that's the case, that's happening.
Okay, great.
They gave no, I mean, this is a federal guideline that's going from the 90 to 10, which is still better than the 75-25 that they would be normally having to do anyway. So I didn't hear anything from the state where they were complaining from that particular amount. And I think they also realized the vast majority, if not all, of the expenditures for COVID are probably going to be pre-July 1st. So even their potential exposure is going to be very minimal, even if it happens.
Yeah, since the federal government kept extending that deadline. I remember when they did last year, when
they
I
have
was
to do it every quarter.
in the administration. Okay, great, 3 more months, 4 more months.
But that is not a declaration from FEMA that the emergency is over. This is just the reimbursement percentages. They have, if they ever say the emergency is over, then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that kicks in and very important dates that would be applicable to us. That is not occurring. The emergency is still going forward. It's just how much they're willing to reimburse is what the current guidance has come down.
Great, thank you. And before I move on, I want to remember to note that Ms. Allard has been here for about 10 minutes, and I got wrapped up in those questions and forgot. So sorry, Ms. Allard.
Thank you.
I have one more question, if that's okay with Bonnie. Okay. So the first column is what we've documented, and then the second column is what FEMA's agreed to pay. Would it be possible, or do you think it would be useful from your perspective, to have a second column squeezed in between those? That's what we submitted.
Well,
Because the first column-
what we've submitted is the projects on the top right there.
Okay,
that
so
are
not only
documented.
documented means we've accounted for all of it and we've submitted.
So there's
to FEMA.
currently 87.5 million
Okay.
that we have documented and put into FEMA's
Great.
hands at some point in the process.
Perfect.
And they've only currently obligated 45 million of that number.
Great. And do you remember off the top of your head how much the obligated and reimbursed numbers have changed since last month? Have we received additional monies in both of those columns? Not received, but
We have not received any money.
Okay, since last
Certainly on that part. We had, the only part that's been obligated was that one state project for 149.
okay.
That's come through. And that state project, I know it's a little weird here, but what happened there is the state told us to go ahead and start handling the emergency, but the federal government didn't declare emergency until a few weeks after that. So the state came back and said, "Oh, since we told you to get going, we'll be on the hook for that period of time between when we told you to go and when the government, federal government actually kicked in," and that's what that project is. So it's on here because it's applicable to COVID, but it's really not a FEMA project, but we wanted to make sure that everyone knew what the expenditures were because they were part of COVID.
Great. Mr. Frisk, go ahead.
As a point of clarification through the chair, we have received money from FEMA, but it's earthquake related. We have not received any FEMA reimbursements since the last time we met for COVID, and that's what we're discussing here. I just wanted to clarify,
Thank you.
we have received additional funds in from our earthquake projects that are continuing to pay income for it. So just to clarify.
And Mr. Frisk was that's a very important point. One of the projects was over $3 million. That was a part of our prepayment for the solid waste building. So that was a significant amount of money.
Thank you for that. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Thurn, for this information. It's so helpful, and I appreciate that you've given us another update on it this month. To follow up on Ms. Quinn Davidson's questions, now I need a little bit more clarification just on the general process. So we have the submitted projects at the top and the not yet submitted, and then the documented COVID expenditures. So the documentation is submitted, and based on the documentation, it's obligated or not by FEMA. And then the reimbursed part, you need to go back then and submit again? Okay.
So the first, the documented column is me pulling all of the invoices, proof of payments, contract amendments, and so forth, getting all the backup for each transaction. And we're rapidly approaching 12,000 transactions from since COVID started, 12,000. So a lot. So you have to have all the backup documentation. You have to have a project created that each individual, I have to make a determination which project that transaction goes into. I've made $97.3 million worth of decisions on which projects a specific transaction or expenditure needed to go in, of which 87 million of those we've put into FEMA's hands, and the other ones I'm continuing to build. Once FEMA gets through their elongated process where they evaluate all of those expenditures for eligibility or additional information, once it gets through all of them, then they go and say everything left in this project is eligible, and they obligate an amount at that particular point in time. At that point, FEMA is done. Then it goes over to the state. The state has to prepare an obligating award document, which we then have to sign. Once that document is done, then we submit all of our expenditures, just like we did to FEMA, to the state. They do a complete review of those expenditures, and when they're happy, we get paid. And then that's when it shows up in the reimbursed column. And so there's lots of review on every one of these expenditures, whether it's 99 cents or 9 million. It's the same amount of effort for each one.
And thanks for reviewing that again. I recall we had a presentation last fall, by Mr. Frisk, and I think yourself as well, with all the details and the steps. And I remember it's a very laborious process, and very much appreciate you doing this. Just a second quick question. Considering where we are at in the pandemic, and in light of that July 1 date change in terms of going from 100% to 90 to 10 from the 4 placeholder projects, it's probably reasonable to assume that it'll mostly be labor at this point in terms of the COVID response. Can you tell me what the Harry Schein activities, I can't remember what that is.
Henry Schein is a vendor that a significant amount of personal protective equipment from the health department was purchased. I've had lots of problems with FEMA on this, so in the end, I decided just to create a project for these transactions and put them all in there because they were all having problems in other projects, and I just got tired of dealing with their questions. It's like 150 transactions, but it's like 50 grand, and it was just not worth the effort. So that I just decided I'm done with you guys, and I just created a project, and we'll just throw everything that's Henry Schein into that one, and then they can go to town on that one. But it won't be holding up all these other projects that they were in at some point in time.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. I think Mr. Frisk wants to add, and then we'll go to Mr. Peterson.
So to that point about the project that he's talking about, the Henry Schein project, and Alden and I have worked very closely on this since my arrival, and trying to expedite reimbursements and such. And as he just said, it's not worth our time, in all honesty, to burn up hours of resources on a $50,000 reimbursement when we can be chasing down a $3.5 million. So these decisions are being made as on almost a daily, weekly basis of, okay, push this aside, move forward with this, and such. So it's actively, I should say, proactively managing the process to get us as much of what we can without too much strain right away. And then we'll go back and fight the longer battle after that.
ahead, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the 90-10 split that's starting in July, are we expecting the state's going to pick up that 10%, or is that going to be a muni obligation?
The expectation, through the chair, Mr. Peterson, that's expected to be the state's matching. The federal government will do 90 and the state will pick up the 10% of eligible expenditures beginning July 2nd forward.
All right, thank you.
Okay, it doesn't look like there are any other questions. I'm sure Ms. Allard, Mr. Dunbar, and Mr. Stolt would speak up if they have them. So we'll go ahead and move to the next item, unless there's anything else from you, Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you.
Okay. And good job making good on your promise to keep us here. It's very engaging. Okay, next 3T, we're going to hear from Ms. Peterson, Acting OMB Director, and get the monthly budget actuals report.
And I'm gonna speed this up now because we also are not pulling the budget to actuals yet until halfway through, so we'll start that early July when we have 6 months of data to be able to report.
Okay, and thank you both, from Treasury and OMB, for being here. I'm sorry we didn't think of that, and always feel free when we're putting the agenda together to say to Desiree, this is where we're at, and we can adjust as needed. So thanks for being here. Great. Any other business that members or administration would like to discuss?
Madam Chair, I texted you to be in the queue.
Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Dunbar, and then we'll go to Mr. Peterson.
No worries, I just did so. So for folks at OMB, before the budget revision process, we had some issues and some disagreements about loading the budget, where we had passed the budget and the administration did not load that version of the budget. Now we've gone past the budget revision process. There were some vetoes that were overridden, and now we're back to a hopefully unified budget. And I'll say also, the revenue concerns that the administration had before don't exist anymore. And so I guess my question is, what version of the budget are you loading? Is there any discrepancy now between what the administration is loading and or administering versus what the Assembly passed, including the budget overrides?
Through the chair, Assemblymember Dunbar, the budget that was passed by the Assembly is what is loaded for the departments, including the veto overrides.
Great, thank you very much.
Excellent. That's great news. Thank you. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was wondering, Courtney, do you have any information on what happened in the first quarter of bed tax this year? Are we ahead of projections, or is it too soon to tell at this point?
I'm actually going to defer to the CFO and the Treasury Department because they're the ones that are going to collect the revenues.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Peterson, we don't have that information. We'll have more thorough details on that specifically on the next meeting in June. Simply said, you have the first quarter and you have a 30-day time frame in which to report your taxes and so on and so forth. You just don't have time to put it all together, but we will on the next meeting. We'll have a full report for you.
Well, thank you. We, of course, have been hearing about possible record bookings in hotels this summer as people have got pent-up demand for travel, and I guess Alaskan is a high priority destination for many people. And I was just wondering if the first quarter had come in ahead of schedule, and because they're anticipating the second and third quarter both being really, really good if people actually follow through on their reservations. So, thanks.
I understand.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Of course, thank you, Mr. Peterson. Anything else from anyone before we move on to number 4? Okay, number 4 is in our agenda is where we have an opportunity to talk about our legislative and budget priorities with respect to the state legislative program and anything else. I think it's a little bit early to be thinking about next year's legislative program and next year's budget, but if anyone wants to get us started right now, please feel free. We have laughter from the audience. Mr. Peterson, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the numbers that came in from the final budget that was passed late last evening looks good, but we got there were close to $400 million in there for ports. Unfortunately, $300 million that's going to Nome, but we are getting $25 million this year and $75 next year. If I was reading what the final bill had in it, and obviously the $600 million request was not filled, but I guess $100 million is will actually is a good start, so to speak. Anyway, I think the fact that oil prices have continued to stay high, even though it may not be very good for consumers and business and inflation, it did help us a little bit with trying to find some money to rebuild and continue to rebuild. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent points. Thank you for bringing that up. Did you happen to notice? Oh, yes.
I was just going to add on to Mr. Peterson's comments through the chair, please, that we did receive notification right before the hearing that we did get $100 million of basic grant money appropriation, however you want to call it, but we also were cited in the bill with a $100 million match. So as long as we can get federal funding of $100 million, we get an additional $100 million from the state. So the number is somewhere between $100 million and $300 million, depending on grant matching.
You're talking about the port specifically.
Port specifically, yes. I'm sorry, I should have said that, but the port does have $100 million, as Mr. Peterson indicated, 25 and 75, 25 this year, 75 next year is how we were understanding it, plus $100 million provision for matching grants against federal dollars that come in. So as we put in PIDP grant requests for $25 million, once if we get it from the feds, that counts towards that match. We get $25 million from the state, so on and so forth, until we use the $100 million.
All right, well, that's good news.
That's great news. Yeah. Members who have served for a while will know we've been asking for years and years, and state government finally has some money, and so it's nice to see that happening for Anchorage. Did Ms. LaFrance wants to ask a question or comment, but I was just going to ask you, Mr. Peterson, before I move from you. Did you happen to notice what the final amount for Anchorage for community assistance would be? Maybe that was Suzanne's question. Okay, it was.
Well, I think it's the 7.2 number that we got in the last budget and finance committee meeting a month ago. I don't believe that number has changed. Not that I've noticed. Now, I didn't look at the entire budget that was passed last night, so I'm not 100% sure of that. But when we spoke with Mills earlier this week, that number had stayed the same. So unless it changed last night, I believe that's what the expectation is.
Okay, so that will be something the Assembly will be discussing soon, I'm sure. Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, I wanted to ask also about community assistance and then also school bond debt reimbursement, because it seems like there's been a lot of change with the budget in the last couple of weeks. But it does seem like we're in a different place than since I've been on the body we've ever been with port funding after all these years. I know, like, as Madam Chair, as you mentioned, that was the only priority that was brought to Juneau, was that request for funding. So it's really remarkable that we're in this position not only to get potential port funding, but possibly community assistance and then school bond debt reimbursement. This is, I mean, for those of us who've been here the last couple of years, unprecedented, which is a great thing. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, you're welcome, and I'll add to that because of the alcohol tax, which some of us voted for, and then the public voted for, we have another way to fund programs, and because of the sale of ML&P, which put about $240 million into the trust, we now have about 10 or 12 more $1 million a year of an increase of the dividend, right, that spins off that trust that we can spend on general services. So this municipality's been making good investments for several years, and now aligning that with the state having some money, this is about as good as it can get. Those of us who, we've been here for years, wish it were always like this, but we're in a pretty lucky spot. And yeah, I guess that's it. Any other comments or questions from members? Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and we do have that trust invested, and I would imagine that the balance has gone down because of the correction in the stock market. I think some of the indexes have moved into bear market territory, which is, I think, when they're down 20% is considered bear market territory. And of course, no one knows how much longer the downturn is going to go, and but eventually, hopefully, things will start leveling out and going back in the direction. If you're a glass half full type of person, that's where
You have to be in this work, don't you?
you pretty much have to. That's correct. Thank
Were you going to add something, Travis?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think we're all in it for the long haul, so we'll see the correction. We're not gonna get out of the market.
Right.
Good idea. Okay, anything else? Do we have anyone here from the public who would like to testify, provide audience feedback? No? Just a lot of smiling faces? Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you to all of you for being here.